Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Max Schmarzo podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope you're doing well. We have a really fun episode. This is a topic that has been on my mind for maybe about a year, 2, maybe 3 years now. Finally going to talk about it. I thought, Max, don't talk about this on a podcast. This is kind of something near and dear to you. Well, you know what? I'd rather talk about it on a podcast, and maybe the idea gets out there and someone hears it and they want to give me a ring and give me a call and we can talk in more detail about it. I'd love it. But I figured it's been a couple of years of thinking about this concept and refining it, and I might as well talk about it because, well, why not? But before I talk about it, I got to give you my sales pitch for my Always an Athlete team. Feel free to join my Always an Athlete team, 7-day free trial. You can get jacked, you can get stacked, you can run fast. That's what it's about. If you guys like being explosive and strong in your lower body, and heck, being kind of a more muscular and more powerful in your upper body, feel free to check out the Always an Athlete training team, 7-day free trial when you sign up on the Train Heroic app. Message board for questions, programs updated weekly. Give it a go. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about this topic that is so near and dear to me. And it's about the idea of an athlete-centric model to training, but surrounded around the concept or under the umbrella concept of value creation. If you think about an athlete as an asset, right? You're an asset to the team. You help the team win. That asset has a value. That's why certain players get certain contracts and certain players don't get certain contracts. And certain players on one team might be more valuable and certain certain players on another team might not be as valuable, but it's all around the idea of value creation. So in that creation of that value appraisal, how much something is worth is relative to how well it would work in a situation. For example, someone like myself who doesn't do construction might not find much value in a backhoe. Sure, they're expensive, but I have no use for one. But someone who does construction might find lots of value in a backhoe. So the price for a backhoe for them is worth it because it is valuable and it will create and generate value for them in the creation of a house. So we have to think about a couple things here. One, value creation or value appraisal, I guess, is based on the situation of the individual within a certain setting. So one team might value one type of player more than another, and another team might value another type of player. Number two is every player has a given value at the moment in time. Right? When you select a player, a roster spot has a specific value. And so if you have a player based on the fact that they take a roster spot up and they have a monetary value, that they have an actual contract, there is a value to them. Now that value can be increased or decreased, but it's not always reflected on their contract because their contract might be, say, for 4 years. And over that 4-year period, their value may increase if they get much better. It may decrease if they get worse. If it increases over time and that athlete has the same contract, that athlete becomes a very valuable asset in the sense that you can get an asset for a relatively cheap amount of money because it's a very useful player. The player is good. The player performs at a higher level than what their contract says they are. And because of that, they are an undervalued player in the sense that their value on paper is less than their value of what they perform. And then the opposite is obviously true. So now we kind of knocked out some of those ideas. I want to talk about how the heck this relates to training and everything. So imagine I am a GM of a team. I have a bunch of players on my team, and I have selected these players for a specific reason. I'm not going to arbitrarily select players, at least I'd hope not. I pick each player with a specific concept of how they're going to provide value to my team. Right? You might pick one player because he's going to be the centerpiece in which scores lots of points. You might pick another player because this player plays a lot of great defense. You might pick another player because they don't turn the ball over and they can run the offense well when our main point guard's out. And you might pick another player because they knock down lots of jump shots, or someone else because they rebound. So every person on the team has a framework or a model from which they provide value. And that's really important to understand because that is how they are assessed and appraised. And that value is based on how they play the sport relative to the needs of the team. Now, what's cool about that is that value as a strength coach has certain physical qualities to it. For example, you might say, oh, this athlete like Dennis Rodman, who is not the most skilled athlete, but was amazingly quick, had great reactive strength, could jump off the ground very quickly. He had lots of value because he had very unique physical motor skills, physical abilities. He could do things other players could not. He couldn't dribble a basketball like Pete Maravich or Allen Iverson, but he could rebound and do certain things that were of high value because of his physical abilities. So it's understanding why that athlete currently has value, what aspects would then take them to the next level to create more value. Within a system, maybe Dennis Rodman would have had more value if he could knock down a corner 3-point jump shot. Imagine he could do all the things he could do, all the physical abilities he has, but he could then now also knock down a 3-point jump shot at a 34% clip from the corner. That would provide lots and lots of value. Or another example would be someone like Steph Curry. Steph Curry, you might say, well, Max, how could Steph Curry add more value? Well, Steph Curry did something that was very unique. Steph Curry got much better at defense. Steph Curry, according to what I've read, put on some muscle mass of physical quality, and that raised his value because no longer could he be taken advantage of through a mismatch in the defensive area, in the post, due to a switch. And he was no longer a specific liability on the court at certain times in defensive situations. So what I'm getting at now is each athlete is selected. And when they're selected, they're at time interval now, right? They're in the current time, and they have a certain model and framework from which they provide immediate value. And you can break down this value into skill, the ability to shoot, the ability to dribble, the ability to pass, and you can break it down to the physical, which allows for some of those skills to shine through, ability to jump, run, sprint. For example, Dennis Rodman's ability to rebound, which is a skill, shone through because he had unique physical abilities, like his ability to quickly get off the ground and jump high in a quick first step. That allowed for great rebounding. On the other hand, you might have a great rebounder because they're really intelligent in positioning and they box out really well and they're able to get in certain spots. Maybe someone like Kevin Love, who was a great rebounder, especially in the early years, because he was physical, he got in position early. So he didn't have the same physical qualities as Dennis Rodman had, but they both were excellent rebounders. So their value as a rebounder cannot stop at simply saying, oh, they're valuable because they are a rebounder. They're valuable because they're a rebounder. The skill of rebounding shown through because of different physical abilities. Now, what's interesting about that is you can develop then some sort of a framework behind each player, which connects their physical abilities and their skill and derive value out of it. So you can look at like Kevin Love's rebounding. Certain physical qualities he possesses allows him to showcase that skill of rebounding. Steph Curry's ability to run and shoot off of screens is not just the ability to run and shoot off of screens. It's also the physical quality of endurance. He has the ability to continuously run around and shoot off of screens. So what you begin to see here is each player's value, whether it is some unique skill or not, has a tight connection to some physical ability as well that allows that skill to shine through. And that specific skill is why they were selected for that team and how they provide value for that team. So the skill is not something that works in isolation. It's always connected to the physical, and that skill is valuable based on whether or not the team needs that skill to be shown through. So it's interesting. You can begin to start to map out an athlete's, like I said earlier, current value state based on their abilities. And now what's interesting, their goal as an athlete should be to try and generate more value. Let's pretend Max Schmarzo signs a contract for 3 years, and I'm going to make $1 million every year. Very cool. Good job, Max. Now, let's say right now, my current value at $1 million a year is an accurate evaluation based on my current skill abilities. The goal of the team should now be then to develop Max Schmarzo to a point where he is worth more than $1 million a year, but I'm only paying him $1 million a year. So now as an asset, he is technically undervalued. He's worth more than what he is on paper. And what's cool about that, that raises my value and my potential as an athlete for next time. If I get traded, I might get traded because another team sees my new value in me. And my team currently says, look, I'm going to get an X return on him. I'm going to trade Max because he's only signed for, say, $1 million every year. But in reality, he's actually worth $6 million every year. So I can trade him to another team. That team can get him. Now they get him because he's undervalued. As a GM, I wasn't going to use Max, even though he had created more value to himself. In return, I might get draft picks or another player, which would have more immediate impact on my team. What's cool about that as a player is now next time I go to re-sign my contract, I have increased my worth. I am more valuable. So both people win. The team that signs me initially wants to create more value out of me. As a player, I want to be more valuable because at the end of the day, if I become more valuable, I not only have a higher likelihood of playing on the team because I am better than I was before. I add value to the team, but I have a higher likelihood of when being traded to play and then sign a contract that is of more value. So the question always becomes, how do we understand what value is? And again, it's upon the initial evaluation of the player. You get the player and you say, look, they do X, Y, and Z. Here are their comparisons. This is what we think they can do. But on top of that, what you might say is, look, we have an athlete, let's say Max Schmarzo. Max might be, let's say Max is 6'9". I'm not very fast. I'm not very explosive. I struggle defensively, but I can shoot the daylights out of the ball. I'm basically describing a 6'9" version of myself. And then you might say, well, if I can get Max to play better defense and I get him to run the floor better and I get him to have a higher level of endurance, he will have more value. So then I look at that. Okay, what is the skill around that? Defense might be a skill, but he also might be lacking the physical abilities to express that skill of better defense. So then I might sit down and look at his model and say, I need to train these specific aspects for Max in order to create more value so he can play better defense. If he plays better defense, more teams will want him. He might get a chance to play more on our team. And at the same time, he might be able to get traded and get in a situation where he's valued and can play more there and eventually renegotiate a contract that is worth more. But again, it's always stemming from the value standpoint. And what's really, really interesting about this, if we had this kind of model of value, it would make training universal. So I had the lucky time talking to some very high-level strength coaches and some guys who work in the professional setting, some guys who didn't. And they talked about one of the things where you might be working with one athlete in the off season. Some guy might be doing it, and then they might come and train with the team. And then they might have been doing something really different in the off season with one guy, and then they come to the team and we might have them do other things. But that's so silly because it's about value creation. If we had a framework from which that athlete currently is valued and why they are good at their sport, and then what the next steps they need to take in specific areas to create more value, training is no longer debatable. It's not like, oh, I think he should do this or I think he should do that. No, it's he needs to do this to become better at his sport. He needs to do X. So if this person goes to train on the moon or train with some other trainer or train in-house, there shouldn't be any debate as to what that athlete needs to do. That athlete is going to want to be, that athlete is going to need to train the same way regardless because it's about value creation. And if you have the team decide what their current value is, what the next steps are to create more value, then the training on the physical side, the training on the skills side, the training on the psychological side, all have continuity. They're universally accepted. They're undebatable. So while they might go train with another person, these same specific motor qualities that allow for better defense, that allow for 6'9" Max Schmarza to run the floor better, are the same qualities being trained wherever he's with externally or internally with the team, because there is a specific model from which that athlete can create more value for themselves. And in turn, the team wants that athlete to create more value. They want that athlete to become more valuable than their current contract says they are on paper. And this can only be done when someone actually takes the time to look at each athlete they have on the team, to break down why they currently provide value, to look at what areas they need to improve, which I don't think is a big stretch for people to take, to say, look, this athlete gets better. This athlete needs to do this to get better. We can break those down into skill and motor qualities that need to be harmoniously developed, along with potentially some psychological or dietary aspects. We can put together a strict guideline of what that person needs to achieve. And then there is no debating as to what training program they should do. Because the reason why you see so many wild training programs is because you lack definition in what that athlete actually needs to achieve. Only when the athlete has strict definition as to what they need to do to create more value, then they have an objective plan. And I don't know what athlete would argue about what areas they need to do to create more value. Most athletes are very aware as to what they need to do to get better. Talking to the athlete can be very helpful, because a lot of athletes are very self-aware as to where they are limited, where they're good. An awesome interview with Brian Scalabrine talked about this. He said, look, I know I could shoot the ball, but I knew if I couldn't guard a ball screen and drop coverage, which is where the defender comes off the ball screen and you have to stay in front of him as a big, I would lose my job. And so in training, he worked a whole bunch on lateral agility and footwork, because he knew that physical ability is what supported his skill of a drop coverage defense on a ball screen. And that created more value for him. If he lost that ability, he would lose value. And so players know this for the most part. But again, there are some specifics in the team. And so a player might be caught up in like, look, I have a limitation in 4 areas. I don't dribble the ball as well as I'd like to. I don't shoot as well as off of screens as I'd like to. I don't defend on ball and isolation settings as well as I'd like to. And I wish I rebound better. And you might then, as a team, go say, well, we don't really care too much about your rebounding because we have really good rebounders on our team. And you aren't actually a primary ball handler. So while you could improve your ball handling, it's not a big value loss or add if you get it, but it's a big value add if you can really guard in isolation. And it's a big value add if you can really shoot off of the move or whatever I said. Okay, now I have a strict definition. Then I can look at it. Well, why can't I shoot well off the move? Oh, I actually struggle running at a high velocity, stopping, gathering myself, and shooting the basketball. I have poor deceleration abilities. Okay, well, why can't I guard off on isolation? I'm not as quick as I'd like to be, and I lack some explosive strength. Okay, now I know the skill and I know the physical ability. I can train the physical ability. I can work on the skill. And if I don't improve, or if I do improve, I can get better at it. On top of this, you can challenge your key performance indicators, because now you have a very strict objective goal. I want to get better at shooting off of screens. Okay, well, you might have certain drills that you might use as a skills trainer. Like I shoot from 5 different spots, 25 total shots, or I do star shooting or whatever. But you can look at, okay, which ones actually correlate to shooting ability off of ball screens? And then you could internally audit your staff in a positive way. No longer are you like, oh, well, which shooting drill works best? You can start to aggregate data and look at, oh, when we do these shooting drills, we know that this actually correlates to ball screen shooting or off a pin down screen, whatever screen I said they were shooting off of better. Okay, cool. So if I want to get better at shooting off a screen, I know these subset of drills are very beneficial. So now we're not just arbitrarily doing drills in training. On top of that, I know that these drills require some level of sprint speed into it. So if I can get my athlete faster, I can get their athlete ability to decelerate. ability to stabilize through the hips and jump and actually shoot the ball well, I can get them better. You can go on and on about this, but there's not like there's a million guys on a basketball team or whatever team. And so I've always driven me crazy about the economics of basketball, because there is from what I've understood in conversation and seen, there isn't this framework that exists. And I was hesitant to put this out here and propose this framework because I thought it was a really cool idea. I wanted to actually go help NBA teams with this framework and this idea. That situation never really came up. It came up a couple of times, possibly, but I don't think everyone understood what I was trying to get at. So I decided to put it on a podcast here today as I ramble on for 20 minutes about it in hopes that maybe it leads to something more positive. Again, if you're interested in hearing more, please contact me. I'd love to get people's thoughts on it, but I'll leave it here for today. And to wrap it up, it's about value creation and creating value in the athlete and understanding what things they need to work on. When you understand the true meaning of what it is to create value for the athlete, there's zero debate and zero argument as to what they should be doing in their training. There isn't a question as to what exercises or movements or skills they should be doing. It should be fairly universal, regardless of where they go and who they train with. Because if that person who's training them isn't training them in a way that's going to help them create value, that's a bad investment for that athlete. That athlete is currently paying that person money to not have them make them more valuable, which is a wild concept, because in training, someone pays you to help them get better at a sport. You are an investment. They're paying you to increase their value. That is the purpose of training. You train someone to increase their value. So if I don't understand or have an idea of a framework of a hypothesis through which their value is appraised from, how can I possibly do my best job? And we can currently only, as stated right now, kind of guess, but ultimately it would have to come up from a hierarchy in the actual organization. When the organization looks at it and says, well, I think this player should do X to get better. I think they do blah, blah, blah. This is how we currently value them. And this is why we currently value them. This is our model and our framework. We think to create more value, these specific areas are where they need to develop. We will evaluate those areas of development. We'll reevaluate whether or not we think those are the best areas of value for them to accrue and get better at. And then we can make the decision to go from there. And that creates universal continuity, hopefully engagement. I'm not sure what athlete wouldn't want to create more value, and ultimately a more effective economical system. So I'll leave it there for now. I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you guys find this interesting and you want to contact me, please do. Thank you. Hope you guys are doing well, and take care.